All right, so today's lab, what about textbooks? Now, I talked to you yesterday about learning, and one of the things about learning is generative learning, where you try to propose a solution without me giving you the tools to do so. So that's what we're going to do today with this lab. The objectives are, is I want you to devise a complete requirements process. If you don't know how to do that, I don't expect you to. I'm going to teach you that this quarter. But I also want you to carefully, whatever you come up with, I want you to carefully evaluate them. Why do you think this is appropriate? Why do you think we need to do this step? We're also going to explore solutions to hard social problems. I picked textbooks. Remember how many people raised their hands yesterday when I said you're going to get the textbook? That's a problem, right? That's a big issue. Surprisingly enough, when I asked the freshmen the same thing, and there wasn't, although there was a higher amount, but it wasn't 100%, right? I had several questions where people asking me, how can I do this without the textbook? It's a big deal. So, for this lab, what I want you to do is that I'm going to do something about this textbook problem. This is the scenario. Now, we are, you can see, students complain about the cost and utility of the textbook. They resort to taking actions such as creatively finding it online. And I'm sure everybody's experts at mastering the requirements process, star.pdf. In Google? No? No one's done that? Blake's like, what's Google? Okay, so I want you to come up with a solution given these constraints, and then come up with a way to gather the requirements for that solution. Okay? This makes sense? Matt? How are you going to come up with this? How are you going to come up with your requirements? Here's the constraints. It must be cheap to produce and cheap to provide to students. So it can't cost a lot. You can't say, well, Dr. Dennis, to get students to get this textbook, we're going to print it on gold leaf paper. So they have something of value in their backpacks. No, right? It must have high adoption rate among students. We saw yesterday that textbooks have a very, very low adoption rate. Now I know the key argument is that it's because of cost, but I think there's probably more to it than just cost. It must be holistic. Means it must have exercises for you to do, maybe some quizzes, right? It must have the content you need. And it must be easy to maintain without legal risk. Thanks, Patty. Apparently, without no legal risk means it should have legal risk. But this, we can't steal other people's content. Here's what I'm willing to give you. I will write content. Okay? I will write content. I will also provide you an always-on computer to the internet. And I will give you access to a high-quality color printer with binding capability. Okay? Now, what I want you to do is I want you to prepare a summary of your solution. What do you think your solution is going to be? Some kind of graph of your process to collect requirements, and then arguments, description of arguments for those steps. Here's what the step is. Here's why we think it's here. Here's why it's in our process. I want this report to be professionally formatted, nice grammar, right? And then you'll submit. You'll do this one submission here, which let me show you. I'll fill in these emails now that I have the teams assigned. But so if you do this, you'll get a submission receipt. This was actually one of the feedbacks that I got last quarter was you guys were submitting stuff, Google Forms, but you had no way to know. So this will give you a confirmation. Indicate your team. This is your team's emails. And then just give me a URL to a comment-enabled Google Doc. Okay? So I need to be able to annotate it with comments. All right, and that's how I'm going to give you feedback. I'm going to comment up your document. I figured that might be easier than some disconnected report. The other thing that I want you to do, and you will do this on every lab, is I want you to do a self-assessment and a peer assessment. Okay? So you're going to self-assess how you feel your primary role was during this effort. Were you mainly providing leadership? Were you mainly providing organization? Were you mainly providing creativity? Okay? I also want you to self-assess how you felt you contributed to the lab. Do you think that you did excellent? Or do you think you did awful? And is awful your typical contributions to labs? In your own perception, right? Sorry about that. And then I want you to evaluate yourself. I believe I deserve this kind of grade. Then do some reflection. I could have done better by showing up on time for meetings or whatever. Then I want you to assess your team. How much effort do you think your team put in? What your team could have done better. And I want you to highlight one team member who made a significant contribution and highlight one teammate who didn't, right? Now, the reason why I'm doing this is twofold. One of them, this is going to give me some insight into how your team is functioning, all right? The second thing is, I believe it's critically important as a software engineer to be able to self-assess and also assess others. People with software engineering degrees tend to rise in the ranks at companies. All right, you guys will most likely rise up to some kind of leadership role, and as a leader, you need to be able to assess. So this will give you some practice on assessing. Now, I am not sure how this will contribute to your grades or grades of your peers. Okay? Because my main purpose is I want you to have practice to assess, especially before you go into SDL. Because when you're in SDL and you guys are working together, you might want to start to get very brutal with folks that are on your team that are dragging you down. And this will give you some practice on being constructive, and I'll give you some feedback on tact or maybe commentary or insights, because I've done this a lot in my career. But it's just something I want you to start doing, start thinking about. So any questions about this? Okay, and this your self-assessment and your peer assessments will not be shared with anybody, so they won't see. No one else will see this stuff. Okay, I don't see a lot of smiles. Allison's not smiling at all. Okay. Okay, so any questions about the lab? Do you know what to do? Now, one thing to note is that these are constraints on your solution. These are resources, but these are not your only resources. And you don't necessarily have to use them. This is just what's available to you. All right, get started. I'll be here to answer any questions.